The story I'm about to tell you will shock you with its details and the inaction of the police. Be sure to watch this video until the end so you don't miss anything. The ending is simply shocking. If you enjoy the video, please like and subscribe to the channel. On Friday, September 9th, 2016, 79-year-old retiree Georgette Bonneau was walking along the forest trails in Isère, France. The elderly woman often came here for strolls. She had lived here all her life and knew this place to be quiet and safe. She made a few rounds along the trails and was on her way home. Unfortunately, on September 9th, Georgette was never meant to return. The pensioner disappeared. It seemed like the authorities paid no attention to the event at all. She was a lonely woman, so there was simply no one to report her disappearance. After a short search, the case was forgotten, but not forever. On August 26, 2017, in Le Pont de Beauvoisin, just a couple of kilometers from where the elderly woman had disappeared, a wedding celebration was taking place. Amidst the festivities, no one noticed a stranger slipping into the joyful gathering. He blended seamlessly with the crowd, even though he only knew a few people there. However, he wasn't planning to disrupt the event. He had completely different intentions. He simply mingled and enjoyed himself along with the other guests. There were many children at the wedding, including 8-year-old Maëlys de Rojo. Despite the lively and cheerful atmosphere, the celebration ended on a tragic note. Maëlys went missing. Her disappearance shocked her family. At first, everyone thought she had simply gotten lost among the guests, and her relatives began searching for her, but she was nowhere to be found. Naturally, her parents contacted the police immediately. At 4 a.m., the gendarmes arrived at the venue and began their work. In reality, Maëlys was the 30th person to go missing in the area between 2007 and 2017. All of these individuals had simply vanished. Either their disappearances were never reported, or investigations stalled immediately with no leads to be found. No one could understand what had happened to these unfortunate people. It was likely the work of a criminal, or even multiple perpetrators. The wedding had a warm and family-oriented atmosphere. No one expected such a vile act, such a shocking event. But the fact remained, an 8-year-old girl had disappeared during the celebration. Her parents were devastated. It seemed as if the child had simply vanished into thin air. Not a single one of the 300 guests had seen where the girl had gone. 5 days after Maëlys' disappearance, the police still had no leads. The detectives did their best to console the family, but deep down, they knew that the chances of finding the child alive were very slim, considering how much time had passed. Even the possibility of a kidnapping seemed unlikely, as no one had contacted the family to demand a ransom. Then unexpectedly, a man named Ludovic came forward at the police station. He had been one of the wedding guests and believed he had valuable information for the investigation. The witness turned out to be a close friend of 34-year-old Nordal Lelandais. According to him, his friend had not been invited to the wedding. Nevertheless, he showed up and behaved strangely. He decided to attend in place of his cousin, who had received an invitation, but couldn't personally congratulate the newlyweds. Nordal didn't attend the actual ceremony, but arrived at the reception. There, the uninvited guest was quite sociable, perhaps even overly so. He eagerly introduced himself to all of the newlyweds' relatives. Around 6 p.m., he was supposed to leave for some errands. His friend Ludovic invited him to return to the table. As the witness caught Nordal near the exit, he noticed that he was suspiciously avoiding the guests, though he dismissed his own concerns, attributing Nordal's behavior to intoxication. Nordal accepted the invitation to return to the table, then simply vanished. After some time, the uninvited guest reappeared, just as dessert was being served. At around 1:30 a.m., the wedding host announced that the nanny, who had been looking after the children at the event, was leaving. Nordal also disappeared shortly after this announcement. According to Ludovic, it was around this time that Maëlys, who had been running around the hall playing with other children, was nowhere to be found. The guests, already drunk and relaxed, didn't immediately notice the child's disappearance. Some didn't even realize the nanny had left, leaving the children unattended. The abductor acted so precisely that even Maëlys' own mother didn't notice anything unusual, until it was too late. Ludovic believed that Nordal should be investigated. Despite only briefly meeting Nordal, many wedding guests had already come to trust him. Over the course of the evening, he made an impression as a friendly and good-natured guy. The missing girl's mother had even had a short conversation with him and Maëlys. The three of them talked about dogs. Melly's family had three, just like Nordahl. The man offered to show the girl his own pets. Both she and her mother agreed, but since it was already late, the adults decided to discuss it further another time. This completely lowered the mother's guard. According to her later account, Nordahl wanted to personally show Melis his three dogs. But would the child have gotten into a car with a complete stranger in the middle of the night without even warning her parents? There were dozens of people around. How could anyone disappear unnoticed in such a crowd? Whoever the criminal was, he was clearly covering his tracks. One of the guests recalled seeing Melis step out through the back door. At that moment, she was alone. The last time her parents saw their daughter was around 2:30 a.m. When her disappearance was finally noticed and the search began, Nordahl was nowhere to be found. But then he reappeared. He walked around asking guests, seemingly shocked about what had happened. Melis' mother approached Nordahl and asked if he had seen her daughter, to which the uninvited guest calmly replied that he had no idea where the girl had gone. He wanted to join the search, but the heavily intoxicated guest suddenly became sick from the wine and vomited. Nordahl appeared to be in very bad shape, so shortly before the police arrived, around 4 a.m., he left. Early that morning, after the wedding festivities, the entire town was shaken by the news of 8-year-old Melis' disappearance. Just hours after her mother reported her missing, the police launched an extensive search operation. The entire area was scoured, along with every possible place the girl could have gone. Search dogs and helicopters were deployed. Reinforcements were called in from nearby Grenoble. The tension continued to rise, and Melis was still nowhere to be found. The one suffering the most was her mother. Everyone held on to hope that the missing girl was safe, but those hopes were fading before their eyes. The entire country of France was shaken by these events. Her parents distributed flyers and put up posters. Even concerned local shop owners voluntarily displayed notices with Melis' picture and description on the fronts of their businesses. In reality, stories about 30 missing men and women in this region had long been known to the locals, and of course to the gendarmes. But at first, no one connected Melis' disappearance to these cases. People had gone missing across an area spanning roughly 100 kilometers. Most of them were tourists over the age of 30. An 8-year-old child clearly didn't fit the pattern. Rumors swirled about a serial killer, but for an entire decade, authorities had failed to catch him. Since serial killers typically have specific victim preferences, law enforcement never expected a predator in the Alps who didn't care whom he murdered. The missing individuals simply vanished into thin air. Most search operations yielded no results, and whatever was found failed to advance the investigation. But with Melis, things were different. This time, there were leads. The other 30 people had disappeared on the outskirts of town, with no witnesses. Melis, however, vanished right under her parents' noses, surrounded by dozens of people. When she went missing, people began to wonder, could all these crimes be connected? And why had law enforcement failed to uncover anything? This ignited a wave of public outrage. People accused the authorities of negligence. If Melis had truly become another victim of a serial killer, then it was because the police had failed. Eric Ferret, 48, and his girlfriend moved to the area in 2016. They were in a serious relationship and had big plans for the future. However, soon after relocating, Eric mysteriously disappeared. He had gone to a bakery just a 15-minute walk from home, but never returned. He had left the house without his belongings, carrying only his bank card, clearly intending to be back quickly. His girlfriend and a neighbor searched the area after failing to reach him by phone. They initially feared he had been in an accident, but he was nowhere to be found. After hours of searching, his girlfriend went to the police station to report his disappearance. Unfortunately, officers were skeptical. Since Eric was an adult, they suggested waiting 48 hours before filing an official report, arguing that he might have left voluntarily. But she couldn't just sit and wait. She launched her own investigation and asked the bakery owner for surveillance footage. On the recordings, she saw her boyfriend buying bread, exchanging a few words with the cashier, and then leaving. It was clear that he had vanished on his way home. Armed with this information, she went back to the gendarmerie. The police took on the case but ultimately found nothing. Then a year later, she happened to see a news report about Melis' disappearance. A thought immediately crossed her mind. What if her boyfriend's disappearance and the little girl's case were connected? She realized that the bakery footage might have captured someone, a person who later became a criminal, but whom the police had failed to identify. By comparing them with the guest list at the wedding, a match could be found. When the investigation, following a tip from a witness, suspected that Nardal was involved in the case, and the information was made public in the media, a woman named Erica carefully examined his photo. She studied it for a while, then checked the footage and found a match. A face strikingly similar to Nardal's appeared in the bakery recording, and it did not seem like a mere coincidence. At that time, France was in turmoil as disappearances were occurring with alarming regularity, increasing over time. It seemed that the perpetrator's appetite was growing, and public outrage was mounting. Many people were terrified and could no longer feel safe. The 28th person on the list was Arthur Neuer. He disappeared in the heart of Chambéry about 4 months before the girl's abduction. Later, his body was found in a river, and the official cause of death was drowning. His family identified the 23-year-old soldier who had been serving at a nearby military base, but they refused to accept the investigators' version of events. The police determined that, on the night of April 11, 2017, Arthur left a local nightclub around 1 a.m. The club's manager was the last person to see him as he headed in the direction of the barracks. The walk was quite long. Arthur decided to walk along the road, hoping to hitch a ride. The manager saw that he had indeed managed to stop a car. Apparently, Arthur asked for a short ride, got into the vehicle, and drove away. By morning, he never arrived at the military base and was declared a deserter. With the help of tracking dogs, investigators found a trail that ended about 400 meters from where Arthur had gotten into the car. Reviewing security camera footage provided a crucial lead. The car he had entered had actually been parked near the club for a long time. The driver had been sitting inside for several hours, seemingly waiting or watching for someone. Then, as soon as Arthur appeared on the road, the car suddenly drove forward and stopped to pick him up. This raised suspicions, but the make and license plate of the vehicle could not be identified. For several months, this was the only clue in Arthur's disappearance. But the case stalled completely when his body was found in the river. Arthur's family firmly rejected the idea that he might have run away from the military, as he was deeply committed to his service and aspired to build a military career. He had never been in trouble with the law. By all accounts, Arthur was a kind and responsible young man, not the type to flee, and he had no history of mental illness, substance abuse, or conflicts with anyone. Strangely, the police remained inactive. The gendarmes didn't even check Arthur's mobile phone data until much later, when the search operation for Milas began. It turned out that Arthur's phone had last pinged near a roundabout at 3 a.m., not far from the nightclub. Just 4 minutes later, it was detected 6 kilometers away. Another 5 minutes after that, it was traced 11 kilometers from the previous location. Given the speed of movement, it was clear that he had been inside the kidnapper's vehicle the entire time. This clue made it possible to track the mobile phone of the driver, who should have been moving alongside Arthur. The phone belonged to Nardal Lelandais, who at the time was driving an Audi A3. Unfortunately, the club manager who had witnessed Arthur getting into the vehicle could not precisely identify the car's make. On one hand, this was good news. Someone connected to 2 or even 3 crimes could now be arrested. On the other hand, these findings sparked a wave of protests as it became clear that the police could have acted much sooner and prevented Milas' abduction altogether. Nardal was arrested and taken into custody, and his car was seized for forensic examination. He continued to deny any involvement in Milas' abduction and even behaved arrogantly. It seemed that the suspect was confident in his impunity, a trait often seen in some serial killers. He also remained silent about Arthur. When questioned, he responded with remarkable confidence and had an undeniable gift for persuasion. His clear and quick responses left all the detectives working with him stunned. Finding something to hold against him was incredibly difficult. It was discovered that just hours after the girl's disappearance, he took his car to a wash and spent more than 2 hours meticulously cleaning both the interior and exterior. However, according to the suspect, this was completely justifiable. He claimed he was preparing the vehicle for sale, which is why he was so thorough in removing all stains inside. Surveillance footage from the car wash revealed that he paid particular attention to the front passenger seat, spending about half an hour on it alone. Additionally, Nardal took all the wipes and cloths used during the cleaning process with him. He discarded nothing in the car wash's trash bins, which also seemed suspicious. However, he insisted there was nothing unusual about this. He had 3 large dogs that had left a lot of hair and stains in the car, which according to him explained his deep cleaning efforts. Nardal clearly understood that the detectives had no direct evidence against him, so he took full advantage of the situation. Investigators failed to trap him with their questions or break his composure. He remained at the station with his lawyer, providing precise and carefully measured answers that sounded highly convincing, despite the police's growing suspicions. Shockingly, due to a lack of concrete evidence, the gendarmes released Nardal just 24 hours after his arrest. This forced the detectives to continue their investigation without a prime suspect in custody. Further inquiries revealed that, at 34 years old, Nardal had no qualms about engaging in illegal activities. His social media pages contained numerous posts, including videos where he was seen handling illicit substances. He openly boasted online about selling and regularly using drugs. The suspect also had a criminal record. In 2009, he was arrested for theft and property damage. Despite this, Nardal had many friends, all of whom described him as a good person. No one in his inner circle suspected that behind his charming mask, a serial killer might be hiding. He had a deep passion for dogs and was highly skilled at manipulation, capable of gaining anyone's trust effortlessly. It was probably this that cost the life of the 13th missing person, named Lucy Rue. She disappeared 5 years before Milas. The woman was 34 years old. She was receiving treatment at a local psychiatric clinic for phobias. During the day, she attended therapy, and in the evening, she returned home. One September morning, she left the house without any documents or belongings, but never came back. Just like in all the other cases, the investigation had absolutely no leads. It seemed that another victim had simply vanished. By the end of 2017, Lucy's sister, named Natalie, learned about the Nardal case. The woman immediately suspected a connection between this person and her sister's disappearance. She heard about the soldier Arthur and realized that her close relative had gone missing in roughly the same area where the drowned boy was later found. As with the previous cases, the police showed little interest in Lucy's case. It's possible that due to her mental health issues, they didn't pay it proper attention. Her mother and sister had to conduct their own investigation. They noticed one strange thing in her behavior. Just a day before her disappearance, the young woman made a strange purchase, taking several planks and screws from a hardware store. After that, she went home, but none of the items were with her. It seemed odd. Why would she need building materials at all? Her mother went to the shopping center where her daughter had bought the materials and found the same taxi driver who had given her a ride. The driver said he had dropped her off about 1 kilometer from home, along with all the purchases, which he helped unload. What happened afterward and where the planks went remained a mystery, and the next day, Lucy disappeared. Her family felt that the purchases and her disappearance might be connected, but the police didn't even listen to them. After a year of fruitless searching, the case was closed due to lack of evidence. This case also revealed the blatant indifference of the police. None of the girl's relatives or close friends were ever questioned. After this was done 5 years later, they managed to identify a person who had been with Lucy at the psychiatric clinic. As it turned out, Nardal was there at the same time. He was undergoing treatment, and they often had lunch together in the cafeteria. One man who wished to remain anonymous said that Nardal had a particular interest in Lucy. The 13th victim was indeed a beautiful woman, and he had managed to seduce the patient at the clinic. After that, it was less than a week before she disappeared without a trace. Now, with the police finally roused, it became clearer that the missing persons were somehow connected to this area. The attacks occurred within a 25-kilometer radius from Nardal's home. Almost all of the victims, with a few exceptions, were locals from nearby towns or tourists visiting the area. Many had known each other in life. In many cases, Nardal appeared in one way or another in the investigation. For example, in the case of the disappearance of the elderly woman Georgette, who vanished in the wilderness, the suspect actively participated in the search and rescue operation, becoming part of the volunteer group. Unfortunately, all these coincidences were not enough to bring charges against the suspect. Finally, the detectives began working in full force. One of the police officers spent hours reviewing footage from a car wash, observing the manipulations Nardal made with his vehicle during the cleaning process. The investigator noticed that the suspicious man paid the most attention to the trunk. He spent 47 minutes cleaning it, which seemed far from random. The car was confiscated for further inspection. To conduct a more thorough analysis, all the interior panels were removed. Dozens of hours were spent inspecting the car. Eventually, on the wiring cable in the trunk, particles resembling blood were found and analyzed. The DNA from the blood belonged to the missing girl, but this drop of blood could not have just ended up in the car by chance. It was time to speak with Nardal again and ask him some uncomfortable questions. The main suspect was arrested once more and brought in for questioning. From the beginning, he assumed that nothing new would come up and was ready to answer. Nardal acted with the same confidence and arrogance, but his face literally changed when he was asked about the blood in the trunk. Under the pressure of irrefutable evidence, he gave in after a few hours. On February 14, 2018, Nardal confessed that he had left the wedding with Melis because he promised to show the girl his dogs. The suspect insisted that what happened was an accident. According to him, in the car, Melis started crying for no reason, which greatly irritated him. He simply wanted to show her the dogs. Nardal became angry and struck the girl hard on the head, and she died immediately. But later, the suspect revealed that he had hit the girl 4 times. The police continued searching and reviewed surveillance footage. They managed to capture the vehicle with the kidnapper and the girl in the distinctive white dress. They appeared at 2:47 a.m. on a camera located on Pont de Beauvoisin Street. The footage showed that the girl was in the car, and she was clearly scared, pressed her back against the seat, and clung to the locked door. She tried to stay away from the driver. Footage from other cameras showed Nardal getting out of the car, as if contemplating something outside. The girl was no longer moving and may have been dead. Nardal agreed to show the investigators the location where he had hidden the girl's body. However, as soon as they arrived at a remote site with an abandoned factory, he began walking in circles and pretended not to remember the exact burial spot. He led the police around in circles almost all day until the evening when he finally pointed out where the body was. They were able to find the girl's skull almost immediately, and then her clothing. At this moment, the criminal began to stage a drama, falling to his knees and sobbing so loudly that it bewildered all the police officers present. But all of this seemed far from sincere. Rather, it appeared to be staged. Now, 4 months later, the funeral of the girl had taken place, followed by tears from nearly all of France. However, the work of the law enforcement was only just beginning. As it turned out, Nardal left the wedding with Melis at 2:46 a.m. and switched his mobile phone to flight mode so it couldn't be tracked. He disappeared for less than an hour, enough time to deal with the girl, move her body into the trunk, take her to the abandoned factory grounds, and bury her. After that, he managed to return to the wedding, and by around 4 a.m., began to stage a drunken scene to slip away unnoticed and avoid suspicion. There was only one inconsistency in this reconstruction. He had too little time to do everything. This is why the detectives hypothesized that he actually returned to the wedding with the girl's body in the trunk and disposed of it later after he had safely left. This explained why he was able to escape so quickly after returning. He clearly feared that the arriving police might ask him to open the trunk. The girl's body was only separated from her family by a few millimeters of metal from the trunk door. Meanwhile, the murderer cynically lied to Melis's crying mother. Unfortunately, the body of the girl didn't provide many answers. By that time, it had completely decomposed. The police received only skeletal remains. The forensic expert could not determine the exact cause of death or all the injuries the victim sustained. It was impossible to assess whether the girl had been raped, which was considered the main motive for the abduction. The forensic expert did note a broken nose and jaw, but these injuries were not severe enough to cause death. Based on the fact that there were no signs of gunshot or stab wounds on the bones, it was likely that the child had been strangled. Nardal himself referred to a fit of rage, claiming the child cried for no reason, causing him to lose control, and he also provided other explanations. Primarily, he cited mental health problems, probably in an attempt to avoid prison due to insanity. However, the conducted test confirmed that the perpetrator was fully healthy and aware of what he was doing. Initially, Nardal denied his involvement in Arthur's abduction, But on February 5, 2018, he admitted that he had picked up the soldier in his car that night. This was why their phones were moving together in the vehicle. However, Nardal allegedly dropped the passenger off and didn't know what happened to him after that. The key evidence linking the suspect to the soldier's murder came from disturbing search queries on his phone about human body decomposition. Upon learning this, the suspect confessed to killing the soldier on March 29, 2018, but also called it an accident. According to him, the two men started arguing in the car, which escalated into a fight, and Arthur fell out of the vehicle. He claimed that the accidental fall led to the soldier's death, which he considered an accident. Investigators, however, were convinced that the situation was quite different. It's possible that they had a dispute, but initially Nardal had chosen Arthur as his victim. Like a predator, he was looking for someone that evening. It is likely that Nardal struck him with stones. Since premeditation could not be proven, this reduced the maximum sentence to 30 years instead of a life sentence. At the trial, the prosecution was represented by a woman named Monique, who had actually managed to escape from this maniac. She did not want to go to the police, fearing revenge, but eventually decided to tell her story to help the prosecution imprison this monster for a long time. According to the woman's account, around 10 a.m. one day in July 2014, she arrived at a store where she saw a stranger in a dark Audi A3 parked in the lot. He greeted her. Monique replied that she wasn't looking to make new acquaintances and went into the store to shop. She noticed that this man was following her closely. He walked behind her through the entire store, but did not buy anything, which made her suspicious. When Monique left and went to another store, he followed her again. After the second store, he continued to stalk her in his car, but fell behind when the witness reached the police station. She purposely went to the police to ask for help. The woman believed this was what saved her from death. The police, however, were indifferent and could not do anything since no crime had been committed. At home, Monique told her son about the incident, but only now did she realize who she had really encountered when she saw Nardal's face in the news. Several former girlfriends testified at the trial about the man's hot-tempered and aggressive nature. They reported instances of domestic violence, stalking, and harassment from his side. Nardal was a controlling person who couldn't let go of his exes. The parents of the murdered girl addressed Nardal in court. They wanted to know exactly what had happened to their daughter. The parents were prepared to hear the truth, no matter what it was. The defendant promised to reveal the details. A large-scale reconstruction of events was conducted, but the truth could not be extracted from him. His statements clearly contradicted what had happened. The defendant claimed that he was in a panic and in a state of distress, that he had seen hallucinations as Arthur Neuer, his previous victim, had taken control of Melis's body, which is why he killed the girl. Naturally, his testimony was not taken seriously by anyone. According to the prosecution, now, thanks to Melis's story, Nardal's involvement in all the other crimes became more than likely. The public was still outraged that the authorities' negligence had allowed Nardal to allegedly kill 30 people over 10 years. Many attributed this oversight to the fact that France doesn't have many serial killers, so the law enforcement system was simply unprepared to handle such cases. In fact, the gendarmes did not suspect that a serial killer was operating in the area. His wide range of victims may have confused them, as he killed indiscriminately. The detectives also lacked the necessary experience to solve such complex cases. The prosecution believed that sexual assault was the primary motive in the case of Melis's abduction. It is likely that Nardal raped and killed her, but unfortunately, the condition of the body did not allow these assumptions to be confirmed. Forensic psychiatrists had their own conclusions about how Nardal became a monster. He was born on February 18, 1983, in Boulogne-Billancourt. For some time, he lived with his parents and 7-year-old brother. From childhood, he had a tendency toward pathological lying. Later, his parents placed him in a boarding school at a college in Domessin. It was discovered that one of the local teachers was a pedophile who had abused many children. It was believed that Nardal became his victim during his youth. However, he denied such allegations. After finishing high school, the future killer was unable to obtain specialized education and joined the army in 2002 to become a dog handler. But after just a year, he was discharged due to mental disorders. Upon returning, he fully immersed himself in training his dogs, took odd jobs but never officially worked. As a result of the trial on May 11, 2021, Nardal was found guilty of murdering Arthur Neuer and sentenced to 20 years in prison. A year later, the jury found him guilty of abducting and killing Maylise de Araujo, adding a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 22 years to his punishments. Nardal refused to appeal and considered the verdict justified. Connections to other cases are still under investigation. There are many leads in these cases, but direct evidence is scarce, and Nardal refuses to confess to the other 28 crimes. Currently, he has been charged with raping his 14-year-old cousin in 2017. Nardal denies his guilt, but an aggravating circumstance in this case is that he previously admitted to sexually abusing two younger cousins when they were 5 and 6 years old, respectively. Videos were found on his computer showing him touching young girls inappropriately while they slept. One of these videos was recorded a week before Maylise disappeared. During the investigation, Nardal admitted to sexually abusing her. He explained that he was attracted to young girls, and under the influence of alcohol and drugs, he essentially could not distinguish between a woman and a child. This trial is just beginning. While the killer was in prison, he didn't waste any time. Nardal learned that prisoners in French prisons have almost all rights except freedom and skillfully used all privileges. He corresponded with women, charmed them in his usual manner, and they visited him in the visiting room. One woman was so captivated by him that she smuggled alcohol, prohibited substances, a phone, and sex toys into the prison for him. Using this secret phone, Nardal communicated with teenagers and visited adult websites. Overall, he was quite comfortable in prison. His cell has a refrigerator, TV, computer, and gaming console. Nevertheless, Nardal admitted to other inmates that he planned to escape. At the end of 2023, one of his admirers gave birth to his son. Such is this terrible story. Share your thoughts in the comments. Take care of yourself and your loved ones.